Rock climbing at Stoney Point dates back to the early 1930s, when Glen Dawson brought the Sierra Club here to teach them the latest in modern rope technique and climbing skills. Still spry at 97, Glen used to be at the cutting edge of American climbing. At age 19, he was an integral part of the team that made the first ascent of the east face of Mount Whitney, which at 5'7" on a scale of difficulty was the hardest climb in the States at the time.
One of my most pleasant experiences was climbing, jumping, and rappelling at Stoney Point in the San Fernando Valley. It was a beautiful location. The rock climbing section had training for use of the rope, using the cliffs out there for climbing and for rappelling. And people like Chuck Wills and others went on to climb in many places.
Since Glen's era in the 30s, Stoney Point has produced world-class climbers generation after generation. During the 1950s, a crew of would-be legends like Royal Robbins, Yvon Chouinard, and Bob Kamps cut their teeth at the point before going on to the biggest walls in the world.
My earliest memories of Stoney Point were discovering it while we were hopping freight trains. We looked up and we saw all these rocks and we thought, well, let's explore that. We didn't have any climbing gyms in those days, so we didn't have that as an alternative, and Stony was the place. It was where it was happening, and you could get there just like that.
In the 50s and 60s, I think basically the same thing was going on that's going on now. They'd all meet out here, they'd show each other their problems, they'd work on eliminates, they would just hang out and create this community, and from there they would head off together or separately and, you know, change the world.
Before we went to Talkeets and the big mountains of the Sierra Nevada, for example, or Yosemite, we would have our apprenticeship at Stoney Point. The idea was to learn to climb well and to protect your partner with the rope safely. So I would go to Stony and develop my strength and abilities and in ways that I never knew that I could do. And I never would have done it if I hadn't discovered climbing.
Along with Robbins, Yvon Chouinard was considered one of the strongest climbers at the point during this time.
Chouinard, Robbins, I mean, you know, they were like our heroes. You know, the Chouinard's hole over there, and right there, picture Royal Robbins climbing that thing with a clothesline tied around him. We stood right there and go, yeah, this is where, you know, he climbed at.
While Chouinard and Robbins went on to pioneer big wall routes all over the world that would make them legends, other Stoney Point locals were happy to keep the home fires burning, especially Bob Kamps. Kamps is known nationally for his daring first ascent of the Diamond and for pushing free climbing to new limits by putting up routes at the previously unheard of grade of 5'11". A free climbing master, Kamps was a permanent fixture at the point for over 50 years.
People like Bob Kamps went on to do the first ascent of the Diamond, which was so hair-raising at the time that the Colorado Park Service had banned climb attempts on it, and it took people of their caliber to come and convince the Park Service to change their policy to allow them to go and climb those routes.
At the time, there was no 5'10", there was no 5'11", and Bob was freeing these aid routes back in the late 60s. With hiking boots on, no trick micro nuts and cams and bitchin' shit, funky 50-meter ropes. He was the Huber and the Caldwell and the Eugene, all these guys that are freeing the Potter. He was that of his day.
My earliest days climbing here, I remember seeing this older man with cut-off jeans and the sun-beaten leather skin and wrinkles, the white gray hair. The warmest smile, and as I got older, I realized the history from, who he was and realized, wow, you know, there's someone special right, you know, under my feet.
Guys like Kamps were so smooth and he could pull in the smallest hold, and you look at his hands and they were like these leather mitts. It didn't even look like a human hand. It was just this prehensile appendage for clasping rock. It's amazing.
Bob Kamps was probably the nicest person I've ever met. The most helpful person. Didn't matter if you climbed hard or could hardly climb, Bob Kamps would climb with you.
I mean, just Bob Kamps, just watching him climb when he was in his 50s and his 60s, and it was stunning.
He was a rock master. He had mastered those skills and had kept that mastery at a high level well into his 60s.
Ever since I started climbing here, Bob has been a target for me. When Bob died, I was almost lost, except that I still have a target for another 20 years.